No, we're mostly not here. Most of the people have gone already inside.
Okay.
Okay. We do some good video. And you know who to send it to, right?
Yes. Yes.
Right.
Thank you.
Come on in.
Thank you.
You can sign in on the way out if you like. It's too hot to stand outside. Come on in.
It's from 6:30 till 9.
Standing room only. What's that? You can't get in
I knew this would happen.
Sorry, if I could just... Sorry. Okay. Oh, okay, sure thing. I'm from the D-Triple-C. D-Triple-C?
D-Triple-C.
Yes.
Tracker for the Democratic.
Oh, welcome.
Yes. Sorry, there we go. No, I'll just, there we go.
Tea Party meeting today. Obviously, the crowd represents the interest of the subject. What is going on in Washington, D.C., and the critical impact that it has on our lives and the lives of our children. So thank you for coming this evening. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Absolutely. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now I'm going to ask Al Muller, who's part of our executive committee, to say a few words about our military.
Good evening, everybody. My fellow Americans, being that we just exercised our pledge of allegiance.
Louder.
Okay. Is this better?
Yes.
My fellow Americans, being that we just exercised our freedom to pledge allegiance to our flag and country, we would like to take a moment to honor those who paid the ultimate sacrifice which made that possible. Recently, we have been reminded of that loss when last Saturday, 22 members of SEAL Team 6 and 8 other brave Americans lost their lives in Afghanistan when their helicopter was brought down by enemy fire. Please stand and join the Scotch Plains Family Tea Party in a moment of silence, honoring those who have made the ultimate sacrifice on that day, and those that have done so in the past, and those that regrettably will follow in the future. Thank you.
Let me just see if we can recognize who we have here. People. First, I'd like to recognize Rich Luzzy, who is the chairman of the board of the Morristown Tea Party, which we are the champion say a few words about that in a minute. Tea Party chapters that we hear. I know we have many from the Morristown Tea Party. Can you raise your hand? Pretty much northern New Jersey. We have the Somerset County Tea Party here. And thank you. We have Union County Tea Party folks here. Vicki Jensen's folks. By the way, next Wednesday in this building, there will be Michael Doherty, Senator, who will be talking about his constitutional amendment for fair school funding, which will dramatically, if it is ever made into an amendment, will dramatically change the way school funding is provided in New Jersey. In a town like Scotch Plains, where we have an $80 million school budget, we would receive approximately $40 million from the state, which might provide a little property tax relief. So if you can make it, please come on back down. We also have Ken Noor, again with the Board of Trustees of the Morristown Tea Party. Nico Rago, who has been here in the past, and many of you enjoyed his talks, cannot be here tonight, but he sends his wishes. Jim Lefkowitz from the Somerset County Tea Party. Okay. And I understand we might have some folks from MoveOn.org.
Yay!
And then we have David Larson with us tonight, who ran for Congress back in 2010, and freeholder. Now, as a 501c4, we don't get directly involved in campaigns, but after the meeting is concluded, if you would like to talk to some folks, please feel free to do so. I would just like to turn it over for a few minutes to Rich to just talk a little bit about the Morristown Tea Party and our programs.
Can you hear me without this? Yes. Because I really hate microphones. I want to thank everyone for coming here tonight. It's a great turnout. Morristown Tea Party.
Can't hear on the side road. Can't hear you here. There's about 100 people out here.
Can you hear me now? Verizon, can you hear me now? The Morristown Tea Party looks to the people for personal responsibility. We want lower taxes, less government. Okay? Core principles that the country was founded on. The turnout here tonight is great, and it is indicative of the position that the country's in. It's also indicative, I know MoveOn.org is here, but we need to react the way that they react. We are just getting into this political process. They're old hat. They're well-oiled machine at getting out the vote and turning out people, and that's what it takes, because the only way to take back our country is at the ballot box. So I hope that when you get emails come November or any time that says, we need you here to do this, that you're willing to put down whatever you're doing and come out, because our forefathers sacrificed a lot more than we have for the country that we have today.
Now let me introduce Congressman Lance. I think many of us know him. How many here are actually in his 7th district? Raising hand. Oh, terrific. Okay, great. As you know, Congressman Lance was an assemblyman for many years in New Jersey, and then he was in the Senate. One of the most famous things he did was accomplish the Lance Amendment, which says that the government can't borrow money to balance the budget without the approval of the people. Congress, and he's fighting that same fight down there, and I'll let him talk about that. But I would just like to say he did graduate from Lafayette College. Oh, I'm sorry. Those are but he graduated Phi Beta Kappa. He gets it right, I don't. He also has a law degree from Vanderbilt University, Harvard of the South. And he then went on to get a master's degree from the Woodrow Wilson Public and International Affairs School at Princeton University. He is married to a wonderful woman, Heidi. He has a son who recently graduated from the University of Wisconsin, Peter Frank. And he also has this big dog, which we can talk about. Okay, thank you very much. Please welcome Congressman Lance.
Thank you very much, Al. And will you join me in thanking Al for all that he has done to make this event possible? Lafayette is a great school. My twin brother is a graduate of Lafayette, and our late father was a graduate of Lafayette, class of 1928. And when he died in 2007, there were only 2 graduates in classes earlier than his who were still alive. I have nothing against Lafayette College, but I'm the black sheep in the family. I went to Lehigh. So I hope you understand why I have some pride of going to Lehigh, but I want you to know that I think Lafayette is a great college, so long as Lehigh wins the Lehigh-Lafayette football game Saturday before Thanksgiving every year. I think we may be joined this evening by those who are taping this event, and I would respectfully request those who are taping this event to introduce themselves and to indicate where they're from. The gentleman here.
My name is Jeremy Kovacs. I'm from Scotch Plains Patch.
The Scotch Plains Patch, which is an online newspaper. There are patches throughout New Jersey, Westfield, Bridgewater, and other places. Thank you. And this gentleman?
I'm Ray Yu from Edison. I'm from the DCCC.
The DCCC, that is the Democratic Campaign Committee, Congressional Campaign Committee. So our friends, the Democrats, are taping the meeting. This is the spirit of democracy in action. And to those from MoveOn.org, I met with a group of MoveOn.org earlier today in Flemington, the contingent from the western part of the district. And I know that there are some members of MoveOn.org who are outside, and I indicated to those who are outside, and I indicate now to those who are here, I will be pleased to meet with you, and I believe I suggested to those outside either Friday or Monday, and I did meet with the group. I understand that today was the day that you were lobbying across America in congressional offices, and I try to meet with as many of those who asked to meet with me. And I am pleased to be invited here this evening to address this group. And I addressed your inaugural meeting several months ago, and I'm pleased to be invited back. Congress is in our districts across America at the moment. I don't know whether we will be called back into session. I think that's entirely possible, and I've indicated to my wife that we might not be able to go on vacation for a couple days this year because Congress may go back into session in August. I do not know whether that will occur yet. Obviously, that is a decision for our leadership, for Speaker Boehner and Minority Leader Pelosi, and in the Senate for Senators Reid and McConnell. I'm certainly willing to go back, and I certainly believe that the critical issue confronting this country is the creation of more jobs. Jobs, jobs, jobs. That should be the critical issue confronting this country. We're going to be discussing the debt situation, and I have a slideshow that I would like to present. But let me say, first and foremost, the best way to reduce the federal deficit is to have more Americans working. If we could lower the unemployment rate from a little more than 9%, let's say to 6%, but who would have thought that I'd ever be saying that 6% is low? It's not low, but it's lower than 9%. That would be without doubt the best way to lower annual federal deficits, because there would be more revenue in federal coffers without raising taxes on anybody, and it would restore the American sense of spirit and pride and hope. And I hope everyone in this room, regardless of political party or regardless of any organization which you may be a member, will agree with me that the best way to get America moving again is to get more people in America working, ladies and gentlemen. I do have a slide presentation. We'll go right into it, and certainly I want to leave time for questions from the audience. Our first slide, had Congress simply done nothing this year and continued down the path that was existing, this is what we would get. We'd get a tidal wave of debt. Not that we don't already have a tidal wave of debt, we'd get more debt. In 3 decades, our debt would grow to more than 3 times the size of our entire economy. We've had high levels of debt before, including in World War II, but they were temporary increases in the size of government. The trajectory today is nothing short of catastrophic. There is no way our economy can sustain this explosive growth of debt. Now, let me say, as a percentage of gross domestic product, our greatest debt was in World War II. How could that not be the case? We were fighting for our lives. But the historic trend after World War II was as it is. We are now spending in this country, as a percentage of gross domestic product, roughly 24 to 25% of GDP in the federal budget this year. That is at an historic high since World War II, and this is not sustainable. And the historic norm has been 19 or 20%, and I think we have to get back somewhere in that neighborhood. Our next slide shows total federal spending and revenues since 1965. And I think that this slide is instructive as well. And then our next slide, and I want to move through this quickly to be able to answer questions, but I think to place it in some context. Total spending, this was in fiscal year 2010, it was $3.5 trillion. Now this year, the federal government's going to spend roughly $3.7 trillion. But as you can see, non-defense discretionary spending is what it is, $666 billion. Defense spending, and defense spending is considered discretionary at the federal level, and I suppose we could debate that, but this is as the experts in Washington divide the pie chart, $692 billion. And then we have what is known as the mandatory spending. And this is not related to statutory changes every year. It's fundamental spending as the result of law that has long been in place. Social Security, $701 billion, Medicare, $519, Medicaid, $273, interest, and other mandatory spending. So, as you can see, much more than half of the federal budget is on mandatory spending, not discretionary spending, even if we describe defense spending as we do as discretionary spending. Our next slide, this is the bill that became law last week, the Budget Control Act. It cuts government spending more than it increases the debt ceiling. It puts in place spending caps to restrain future spending. It advances the cause of a balanced budget amendment, although it does not enact a balanced budget amendment. We probably should discuss that this evening. And it does not increase taxes in any way, and it prevented a default of our obligations. And that was the bill that was enacted into law last week. Our next slide. The first part of the component is that government spending is cut more than the debt ceiling is raised. The cuts are $917 billion, and the debt increase was $900 billion. Our next slide. Originally, President Obama had asked for what he called a clean debt vote. And his press secretary, Jay Carney, said we do not need to play chicken with our economy by linking the raising of the debt ceiling to anything. And why is this point important? I think that the fact that there was a linkage is an indication that for the first time in a long time, we're trying to control federal spending. Traditionally, the debt ceiling has simply been raised on its own or as part of a budget document. And I think now we're trying to change that in order to get some control over federal spending. The debt ceiling has been raised over time, many times, since its beginning was really, I think, during World War I. But I do think that we're trying to move in a different direction. Another quote to tie this to the debt limit is insane. This was the President's chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors. I respectfully disagree with that. I think that we're beginning to try to control federal spending. The next slide. President Obama said Friday that his least preferred option in the ongoing spending talks is a clean unconditional debt limit increase without any spending cuts or tax increases attached. The President initially asked for a clean, quote-unquote, vote. Then he suggested there should be perhaps tax increases as well as spending cuts. And what was signed into law last week contains spending cuts. And as you know, in the agreement that was reached in December, over the course of the next 2 years, there will be no increases in taxation. That's at least through the election of 2012. Now, and I will discuss the committee that has just been formed, and I certainly want to discuss that. And I'd be pleased to present my presentation, and I'll be happy to discuss all of the issues on the table. The Budget Control Act, there are more than $21 billion in spending cuts in 2012, but that's just the beginning, because then the Committee of 12 will undoubtedly recommend more spending cuts. In 2013, $42 billion, $59 billion in 2014, $75 billion in 2015, etc., moving on over the course of the 10-year period. The next slide, Republican spending cuts versus the President's proposals. The Budget Control Act is the green rectangle. The Ryan budget would be the green rectangle plus the white at the top above the green. And the President's budget, as introduced, had increased spending by $130 billion. That was the President's budget that he introduced in the middle of the winter. Now, I voted for the Ryan budget, and there's some in the room who may disagree with that. I had a fine meeting with MoveOn.org in Flemington this afternoon. I want you to know I did vote for the Ryan budget. The Ryan budget was passed in the House. And it was defeated in the Senate by a vote of 57 to 40. So it did not pass in the Senate. Fair enough, and thank God we live in a country where we can disagree civilly, and I try to present all of the facts. The Ryan budget, for which I voted, passed in the House of Representatives and was defeated in the Senate by a vote of 57 to 40. The same week, ladies and gentlemen, that the Ryan budget was defeated in the Senate, the President's budget was defeated in the Senate by a vote of 97 to nothing. I don't think that fact got the publicity that the Ryan budget was defeated in the Senate. Now, the Ryan budget is not going to become law. The votes do not exist in the Senate. I voted for the Ryan budget. I don't imagine that I agree with every single component of it, but I voted for it. I just point out as a matter of fact, not debatable. It's a factual matter that the President's budget was defeated in the Senate by 97 to nothing. So I think there was a broad consensus that the President's budget is not the way we should move forward, and I would submit that that's factually accurate given the fact of the vote in the Senate.
We agree.
Our next slide is changes in spending as a percentage of GDP. And under the Budget Control Act, for which I voted, and there may be some in the room who believe it did not go far enough, but I did vote for it, that is the line trending down. And the current CBO path without doing anything is the red line going up. My view on federal budgetary policy is that this should be based ultimately on spending as a percentage of gross domestic product. I think that that is the best way to analyze the situation. And regarding various balanced budget amendments, and there are several out there, The one I like best, and that's not necessarily the one that we will be considering, the one that I like best personally is a balanced budget amendment that says the federal government can spend no more than X percent of gross domestic product. My own viewpoint would be 20% of gross domestic product. In other words, if the economy is moving and there are more tax revenues, you can have 20%. But if the economy is not moving, then I don't think you should go to the extraordinary levels where we are now. Would I make an exception? Perhaps a constitutional amendment should have an exception in the case of war. And we can debate that, and I'm not tied to the 20% figure, but I certainly think our current percentage is much too high. Our next slide, the bill last year, I think it advances the cause of a balanced budget amendment. And it says that we have to vote on a balanced budget amendment. But it doesn't say which amendment in particular. And I would encourage all in the room, regardless of whether you're Republicans or Democrats, regardless of whether you're a member of the Tea Party organization, even if you are a member of MoveOn.org, I would hope all in the room would consider seriously some sort of balanced budget amendment and would consider seriously helping us in Congress decide which amendment to consider. The Balanced Control Act does not say we have to consider any particular balanced budget amendment. It simply says we have to consider one of them. Now, the act does not say we have to pass it. It does not have to become something that we submit to the states. The way constitutional amendments work in this country, as I'm sure you are aware, is to get it to the state legislative chambers. It requires a 2/3 vote in both houses of Congress. 2/3 in the House of Representatives, which I think is roughly 290, and 2/3 in the United States Senate, which is 67. And then, if that were to occur, it would require ratification by 3/4 of the state legislatures, 38 state legislatures. It is deliberately difficult. Do you agree with me that our framers in 1787 were right to make it deliberately difficult to change the Constitution of the United States? I would like a balanced budget amendment, and I understand there are arguments for it and against it, but I am perfectly comfortable with the fact that this is not going to occur easily. We only have had 27 amendments in the history of America. Incidentally, the first 10, the Bill of Rights, are fundamental to our system of government, and as you may know, New Jersey was the first state to ratify the Bill of Rights, ladies and gentlemen. And then the next time there were a series of amendments was the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th amendments, the Civil War amendments, also fundamental in my judgment to the American system of government. So I am no fan of amending the Constitution easily. Our next slide gives the timetable. By August 15th, the Joint Select Committee members are appointed. Senator Reid and Senator McConnell and Congressman Boehner have made their appointments. I don't know whether Congresswoman Pelosi has made her appointments. She hadn't as of 5 o'clock this afternoon. Let me speak briefly about the appointees on the House side, on the Republican side, because I know all three members who have been appointed from among my colleagues. And incidentally, I was not in the running, ladies and gentlemen, to be a member. I'm a sophomore I may be in age, not a particularly young sophomore, but I am a sophomore in the House of Representatives. The members who were appointed on our side are more senior than I in service. The co-chair of the whole group will be Congressman Jeb Hensarling from Texas. He's our conference leader. He and I have served together on the House Financial Services Committee. The other Republicans are Congressman Dave Camp of Michigan, the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, and Congressman Fred Upton, also of Michigan, the chairman of the Energy and Commerce Committee. The two most important committees in the House of Representatives are the Energy and Commerce Committee and the Ways and Means Committee. I happen to have been appointed in January to the Energy and Commerce Committee. I therefore think it's more important than the Ways and Means Committee. That's clearly debatable. But please note that our conference leader, Mr. Hensarling, and the two chairs of the two most important committees in the House are our three representatives. Now, Senator Reid has chosen Senator Kerry, and Senator Kerry was a Democratic candidate for president. He has lots of experience. Also, Senator Murray of Washington is the co-chair, and Senator Baucus, who is the chairman of the Finance Committee in the Senate. Senator McConnell has appointed Senator Toomey, the neighboring senator from Pennsylvania. Senator Kyle, who is retiring next year from Arizona. And Senator Portman, the new senator from Ohio, who has great experience because he was director of OMB under the younger President Bush. So that's that, and then the next time frame, the President requests a portion of the debt limit increase. Congress can deny the request with a vote of disapproval, but then of course the President will probably veto that vote of disapproval. The next time frame, both House and Senate must vote on a balanced budget amendment. Underline, must vote. We don't have to pass it, must vote. And to those who are most energetic in the room, I would urge you to get involved in trying to analyze which balanced budget amendment you like best and to energize the American people on this issue so that we might have an affirmative vote. Then the next slide, by November 23rd, the Joint Select Committee must submit a plan of $1.5 trillion or more in deficit reduction. Our next slide, in December, a deadline for the House Senate to vote on the committee's recommendation. And the next, by January 15th, if the committee plan fails, then there is an automatic sequestration of $1.2 trillion. Now, let me say on the deadline 2 days before Christmas to vote on the committee's recommendation. That is an up or down vote. No amendments on the floor. And important, I believe, no filibuster in the Senate. The legislation says no filibuster in the Senate. So we will have the opportunity, if the committee can agree to recommendations, and that will require a majority of the committee, so it would have to be Democrats and Republicans together, because it's a 12-person committee, half of whom are Democrats and half of whom are Republicans. If the committee can come forward with a recommendation of cuts of about $1.5 trillion, then we are required to vote yes or no. Will I vote yes or no? I don't know, because I don't know what the committee is going to recommend, obviously. But there is a requirement that we vote yes or no without amendments and without a filibuster in the Senate if the committee agrees to a recommendation, which of course would have to be bipartisan in nature. If the committee does not agree, then there's an automatic sequestration. And in February, that's the time when the first tranche will probably run out. Next slide, next presentation. The President can request $1.5 trillion only if the spending cuts of the Commission enacted are at that level, or a balanced budget amendment passes. That would require a 2/3 vote in both houses of Congress. And without either, then the President can only request $1.2 trillion. Next steps. Next, in my judgment, let's pass a balanced budget amendment. Let's maintain a focus on jobs, because I believe jobs need more tax revenues, which will in turn mean a lower deficit. I think the tax code reform and new tax policies that encourages innovation and investment while making U.S. companies more competitive internationally. And let me point out on that. Many companies have profits from abroad that they're not bringing back to this country. We should encourage them to bring those profits back here so that we can create American jobs, ladies and gentlemen. I am open to all suggestions as to how to do that. Incidentally, that would be in the Ways and Means Committee, a committee that is almost as important as the Energy and Commerce Committee. Healthcare reforms that lower costs, expand access, and protect jobs. Now,
Repeal Obamacare.
Repeal Obamacare.
You agree with that?
Yes.
I did not vote for the healthcare law that is. But I do believe we need healthcare reform, and I do not think the status quo before the president's healthcare law became law was where we should be. My view on healthcare reform is that we should have tort reform. I think that would be. I think the purchase of policies across state lines. There are parts of the president's bill that I like. I like the fact that you can't deny coverage to somebody based upon a pre-existing condition. I like the fact that young people can stay on their parents' policies until they're 26.
Make it 45.
You can't please everybody all the time, but I'm giving you my views, ladies and gentlemen. I'll answer your questions, ma'am. Now, on the president's health care law, several district courts have ruled that it is unconstitutional. Several district courts have ruled that it is constitutional. Several courts of appeals are in the process of ruling. I think one may have already. And I hope you agree with me that the Supreme Court should take the case beginning in its term that begins the first Monday in October. So that we will have a decision before the presidential election is in full swing. If the Supreme Court takes the case, I presume it would decide by June of next year. My own view, and I try to be knowledgeable about the Supreme Court. I have a great interest in constitutional law. I used to practice law. I have witnessed an argument before the Supreme Court recently. My own view is that the four more liberal justices might say it's constitutional, the four more conservative justices might say it's unconstitutional, and then Justice Anthony Kennedy, somewhere in the middle, will probably be involved heavily in making the decision. Frankly, I pray every night for the continued good health of Justice Kennedy. I do think that he might have constitutional concerns, as I do. Our next point is we should enact a national energy policy that makes us less dependent on foreign oil. I have voted in the Energy and Commerce Committee. I have voted in the Energy and Commerce Committee to open up in a responsible way the Gulf of Mexico for drilling there. It is off our coast. And let's face it, other countries like China are already drilling in Mexico.
How about Anwar?
That's possible as well. I think that it's more likely, given the complexion of the Senate, that the focus effectively can be in the Gulf of Mexico. Our next slide, pass a balanced budget amendment, maintain focus on jobs, and get the Senate to act on House-passed the jobs agenda that we're passing in the House. And then these are just several examples of bills that have passed the House, and I won't detail them greatly, but we have had several bills that have passed the House that I would hope that the Senate would consider. And there are others. Now, that concludes my presentation, I believe, and I wanted to spend some time on it, but I certainly wanted to take time for your questions, and I'll be happy to take your questions, and thank you very much for listening to my slide presentation.
Portion of it. Let me, first of all, I left off the Montville Tea Party. Montgomery. Did I leave out any other tea parties over here?
Bergen.
Bergen. Thank you, Bergen. All right. We've got a lot of people, and we want to cover as much territory as we can. I'm going to, when you ask a question, your name, what organization you're with, what town you're in. Let the questioner talk directly to the congressman, and let's keep the interaction down as much as we can. If you disagree, the next questioner can pick it up. Be respectful in your questions and let the people have. If questions begin to get to be repetitive, or if I at some point feel that we're just going on and on an issue, I'll try and move it along. With that,
thank you. The lady with the black blouse, yes.
My name is Sarah Alford. I live in Franklin Township, and I'm going to join the Somerset Tea Party at the end of this month.
Franklin Township, Somerset County.
That's correct.
Because there's a Franklin Township out in Hunterdon as well. So your member of Congress is that Frank Pallone or Rush Holt?
Rush Holt.
Rush Holt, yes.
You talked about jobs,
yes.
but you didn't tell us exactly what you think needs to be done to create these jobs, to make it more advantageous to get the communities to do that. I have an idea, but I'd like to hear yours.
Well, I will give you my ideas, but first I'd like your idea.
All right, you need to cut the payroll tax, and you need to cut across the board everybody's tax. You need to cut corporate taxes, get rid of the capital gains tax, whatever you need to get rid of to get people working, I own a business in Texas. We are not working because people are holding onto their money. The banks won't loan because they're afraid of the future. They want to know for sure that if they give their money to someone who wants to buy a house,
yes, I would summarize your question and your comments in one word: certainty. And there is no certainty at the moment. Our tax rate's going to rise. Are they going to rise as a result of what the Committee of 12 does? Are they going to rise at the end of 2012? Were they going to rise last year, except we passed a continuing resolution where the President and the Congress agreed, and this was a democratically controlled Congress, that there would be no tax increases through 2012. So we need greater certainty. I do not favor raising taxes. I do favor tax reform, and although they did not reach an agreement, President Obama and Speaker Boehner, they were in discussions on reforming the tax code, eliminating certain loopholes, and probably reducing rates. Now, that's speculation, and I don't want to put words in the mouth of either President Obama or Speaker Boehner, but I believe that was the direction in which they were headed. Now, on the payroll tax, there have been many who have advocated that it should be reduced or eliminated for a year. I would want to know how much revenue would be involved, and I'd also want to know how that affects the Social Security system. But there have been some who have been advocating that. I can assure you the Ways and Means Committee, on a bipartisan capacity, is working on reforming the tax code. Now what I would do, some of what I would do is the slides that indicated the bills that have passed the House that are currently languishing in the Senate. And they relate to energy, and they relate to Dodd-Frank, and there are several others, and I didn't go through them, but there were several that we passed in the House. But first and foremost, I would say, my view is there has to be greater certainty, because as you point out, there are funds that are on the sideline not creating jobs, and we need to do that. 7 in 10 of the new jobs that will be created in this country will be created by small business, including perhaps your business. Small business is the engine of job creation in this country. And so I think we need greater certainty. Yes, right here.
I actually, my neighbor in Franklin Township, I'd like to respond.